I'm Mark Seifter.
And I'm Linda Zayas Palmer.
And this is Arcane Mark.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Arcane Mark. Today we're going to be talking about mascot characters in your games. So first off, let's start by talking a little bit about what the deal with mascots is. Hi,
So what is a mascot character, Linda, in like TV or books or video games? What would you consider to be a mascot character?
Mascot characters are oftentimes going to be the ones that you're going to see on the cover or on the package or things like that. They are the character that represents in some ways the brand or the story. Like if you think about like Pikachu and Pokemon, for example.
Did you see my tweet for the episode?
No, I didn't.
It's Pikachu.
Oh, it's Pikachu. Well, there you go.
There you go.
Or like, Mickey Mouse for Disney or things like that. They're not going to show up everywhere, but they're going to
Mario for
Nintendo. But they're going to be something that's really, really recognizable and really associated with the story or the brand. Even like Captain Crunch on Lucky Charms. If you know the brand, you probably know.
Captain Crunch is the mascot on Lucky Charms?
I mean, no.
I'm really surprised by
Captain
this.
Crunch on Captain Crunch or Lucky on Lucky Charms.
Okay.
I misspoke. Yes. We're just starting out. So when you talk about a mascot character in a game, in the same way that mascots of brands or other things like that, they're generally going to be fairly easy characters to grok. They're going to generally be pretty relatable or cute or otherwise like. You're not going to see the mascot characters being involved in things that are tricky or controversial. You're going to see them being like, oh, like, it's the Pikachu. The Pikachu's doing these sorts of things. Mascot characters in games are often going to be sort of, most often you're going to see them as being like animals or little magical creatures or other beings that are, that the party gets really attached to and travels along with. So you might see them.
Like an Eldamon?
Yes, exactly. An Eldamon could totally be one. Or like considering what I was saying, a familiar could totally be a mascot character. Or it could
arguably Pontus the Tidepool Dragon was a mascot character of ours called Shackle's Game, for example.
Yeah, for sure. So it's more it's about it when in the game specifically, it's about how much do your characters relate to that character and do they bring them along. Like a mascot character is really not something that you can impose as a GM from the outside. It's really got to be something that the players are really latching on to. Oftentimes,
because it's their mascot
yeah, because it's their mascot too.
You can't have like a mascot for your villains unless it's like some weird recurring hench creature or something like that. And that doesn't even work in tabletop RPGs.
I found that in a lot of cases, mascots aren't going to be something that the party starts with. They're going to be something that the party picks up. Like, the party finds a cute animal along the way and then they awaken the animal or they find this spirit and then they befriend the spirit and then they decide to travel alongside them. So people are saying, oh yeah, villains get mascots like Meowth. Yep.
In Mr. Bigglesworth, in movies and TV, it's much harder to have a villain with a mascot in a tabletop RPG. They certainly do get mascots in other media, but you typically in a tabletop RPG, your mascot is going to be one that follows the party members because those characters are recurring, and they are recurring without you needing to use kludges to make them recurring. Whereas if you've gone to the trouble of making a recurring villain, a recurring mascot for a villain, it's difficult because otherwise, what are you going to do if the villain gets defeated? Now, you could do some kind of situation like the recurrent hench mascot that somehow is the hench mascot for every different villain throughout the this season, like in the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo, there were the two, like, bumbling ghost hench, like, mascot hench creatures, Bogo and Weird, and just, like, whatever big ghost was attacking that week, somehow they would get those same two ghosts as their minions every time. You might be able to pull it off, But even then, the PCs probably would capture or defeat that minion as well.
Or like in the sort of video game trope of a mascot not as a single creature, but like as a creature type. Like, for example, in the Dragon Quest series, Slimes being a mascot, and it's like, okay, yeah, you know, you can keep seeing Slimes coming up, and there's more powerful Slimes, and then you get the King Slime and all that kind of stuff.
Wari Slime Janai, Linda.
So, for example, you could have a mascot in that regard. Or like a recurring thing, or like, for example, if you have a villain that's more of a long-term threat that the PCs know they're not just going to be able to go punch, like sort of you have a thing where it's like, yes, you know, the evil ruler and like their little cat who's always there,
right,
making
like Barzillai threw it in Hell's Rebels shows up, or Iliosa and Curse of the Crimson Throne. They both show up near the beginning, but they're kind of in charge of the area, and you can't just attack them at the beginning. So if they had an animal mascot, they could pull it off.
Yeah, so if you've got a villain who's recurring and going to be on the screen in a way that, like, you expect the PCs aren't just going to be able to punch them because they're part of some kind of larger power structure, then totally.
Yep. Rico is pointing out bandits from random encounters, or any kind of antagonist that gets adopted by the party for a redemption arc can be a something of a kind of a mascot. Like, in a way,
yeah,
you could consider that to be the case, although sometimes they wind up being pretty unusual mascots. But, like, would you say, like, Ziobi was a mascot of Jade Regent?
I wouldn't quite call her a mascot, but I would definitely say that she was a very interesting addition to our group, having adventuring with an evil harpy.
Chris Abbott is wondering, is Iago the parrot a mascot character for Jafar or a comedic sidekick? I think that he is sort of the mascot character who does serve as a comedic foil to the more seriously evil Jafar. And then also, if you're talking about Return of Jafar or the cartoon series that came afterwards, where Iago did a heel face turn, then he became a party mascot. And Rico said that as well, although I had said it in my version of the world before it appeared in chat. I'm sure that the timing was off for the rest of us. But
generally, for these mascots, yeah, they're going to be taking on more of like a role of being the comedic foil is a common role, or like, you know, the comic relief, as is sort of being like the, you know, the cute little creature that you're like, the cute little animal that you're trying to protect, or, you know, sort of the you can also see them sometimes showing up as like the ancient source of wisdom, but with severe limitations type trope. But they're a lot less likely to get into that ground, just like I would say like corporate mascots and things like that. You're not really gonna see your mascot character like at the center of like some raging moral dilemma, or like being put into grave peril. Usually these mascot characters are a source of, when you consider the structure of the adventure and how you're gonna have parts that have more tension and less tension, times when you're interacting with a mascot character are gonna be more of those moments of less tension generally.
That's right.
You know, they might get themselves into hijinks. You might even have like one of our campaigns with one of our mascot characters, Pontus, the one that Mark mentioned. We had a little side story that's like little adventures in the mascot. So those kinds of things can be really fun to try to give the PCs a sense of what's going on.
I actually ran the side story for the mascot as like a non-canon, but Linda, as the GM, enjoyed playing the mascot so much, she's like, this is now a canonical thing that happened, where Pontus like sort of accidentally saved the ship from gremlins while he was trying to search for issues from the Coral Capuchin familiar of one of the other party members that he has a rivalry with. So, considering Warlock points out that a redeemed villain mascot that is parallel in certain features and ways to the actual main villain of the campaign can reinforce the theme of the adventure.
Or, yeah, sometimes one of the PCs as well, he also mentions, can become a mascot, especially if they're like a bard or like a puppet or a leshy or someone who's like really cute.
And now people in chat are talking about not only the Aladdin TV series, but also Pirates of Darkwater, which was a great show, except for that they never actually finished it. Like, they stopped right before you were gonna figure out what was gonna happen. It just got canceled. That was pretty bad. They had a mascot character too, Niddler the monkey bird. He was just this monkey bird, and he just wanted to eat his melons constantly and was incredibly cowardly, kind of like a Scooby-Doo type mascot character, and just would constantly get into his own issues and trouble, and generally was not helpful for the team, except for in whatever episode where he was like, oh no, I'm not helpful for the team, and then they had to be shown that he was helpful.
Yeah. So that gets into sort of a thing of what are some of the things to try to do versus avoid when you're presenting a mascot character. So when you have mascot characters getting into hijinks, you want to avoid making sure that it feels like they're dragging the players into trouble or taking them off onto tangents that the players aren't interested in engaging with. So like if the mascot character was constantly going off and saying, oh, I'm going to get you all into trouble as a driver, it's like, well, really? Or sort of like the or being fitting into that role of the escort mission character that you're always having to protect. Oftentimes with these kinds of mascot characters, it's if they're not a PC, if they're just like a little friendly creature that's along with you, it's good to just have them sort of. And when the combat begins, they sort of scamper off, and we don't talk about them until after the combat, unless there's someone that the player wants to bring in, like, oh, it's my familiar, I want to use my familiar abilities or whatever.
That makes sense. And, like, I know escort missions and having to carry along someone that doesn't really know how to fight is, like, one of people's least favorite things to do. And just players often just get annoyed or frustrated by those kind of characters. So what would be some tips that you would give towards putting in mascot-y or escort-y style characters and having the players really enjoy them?
So whenever I'm thinking about like an escort mission type thing in a TTRPG, I tend to think about like, you know, the most what a really annoying thing is like if you're going along and you're trying to protect this really weaker lower level character, and then like the enemies all start piling on them, attacking them, and it's like, okay, seriously, well, we can't like stop that. So unless there's really a good setup for the PCs to be able to have resources to protect the NPC, usually going with tactics that are basically like, oh, you know, the NPCs want to capture this person that's with you, but they recognize that person's not a threat, you are. So they're going to try to attack you and take you down. So therefore, like, you don't risk that person coming to harm unless the entire group is taken out. But
how do you avoid people getting annoyed by the mascot, like, or the escort character, like a Scrappy-Doo situation where everybody, like, so many people hated Scrappy-Doo as a character, they just found the character grating to them, even to the point where it became a meme, and in fact, TV tropes called the character that everyone hates on the show the Scrappy.
Yeah. Well, I think part of it has to do with the attitude of the character. Like, a character who thinks they're better than the PCs and is constantly then getting the PCs into trouble that the PCs are having to clean up, or is, like, really boastful beyond their abilities in that sort of way, that can definitely be annoying. Because it feels like then they're stealing the spotlight and then running off, or that it feels like they're not appreciating their role within the party or what the PCs are contributing. They're just saying, well, I'm the best and you don't know what you're doing, so I'm going to go cause this mess.
So, I guess what you're saying is they shouldn't just be, like, instigating agents that are always causing an issue. That's something that you can take to heart as a GM, not just for mascot characters, but just in general. When you're adding an additional facet to your campaign, you want to think about a way in which it's not sort of just an albatross you're hanging around the player's neck. You want them to like that facet. Yeah. That's true if it's a mascot. That's true if it's like, hey, what if the players own a business or something like that? If you do that and then just constantly the only time it comes up is that there's problems and like evil like tax people come in with like incorrect information for your business, or like the local thieves guild breaks into your business, it's constantly, even if it's interesting plots that you have to do, there's still be a sense that like that business is trouble. And similarly with the mascot, if all they're doing is stirring up trouble, even if it leads to interesting adventures, you're not always going to get the same, that lovable mascot that you might from a TV show when people actually have to role play dealing with their mess.
Now, mind you, if that mess is something that's very much in line with what the PCs have been doing and encouraging the mascot to do in the past, that can make a lot of sense. Like, let's say that you have a mascot who's constantly stealing things, and then the PCs are like involving the mascot in plans to go in and steal things, and then at some point you have an adventure where like, oops, the mascot went and stole something. It's like, well, we've been asking the mascot to help us steal things for 5 levels, and we know the mascot likes shinies. Like, okay, I can see why this happened. This isn't just kind of out of left field.
Yeah, to be clear, I'm not saying never have the mascot get into trouble and require some negatives or some situations where you have to bail them out or they cause some kind of disaster. I'm saying make sure you balance that by also having some positive features. Some ways that you were helped in a way that if you didn't have the mascot along, that you wouldn't have been able to do something cool, or it wouldn't have been as good. Or the mascot can be, like some people were talking about in chat before, just a net neutral character that mostly is just around to be the mascot and is not really causing problems or solving them. But if you want them to sometimes cause problems, be sure to have them sometimes helping out.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it, and I think that's what I was instinctively going for when I said, they've been solving problems for a while, then maybe they get into a problem. Or maybe they get into a problem every once in a while that's a problem of lower stakes, where if you don't fully get the mascot out of that problem, it's not going to be like, the world is coming to an end or that kind of thing. But maybe you can earn some kind of small reward for doing a better job of getting the mascot out of a particular problem. Like, you're, in this case, like your thieving mascot has been stealing pies from the bakery. Like, you're probably not going to get in really big trouble for the fact that your mascot's been stealing pies from the bakery or something like that. But maybe you can have like a little lower stakes adventure for it, or maybe your mascot comes back with a group of pies, and one of the pies is poisoned, and you're wondering why the heck does the baker have poisoned pies, and that's like a new plot lead. So so with situations like that, they can really be also a way to help drive things forward. They can also be a way to provide a different perspective on things. Especially when you've got these former villain mascot, or a mascot who has a reason to see things in a different way. Like, our mascot is an ancient elemental spirit who is stuck in a tiny dragon body that's the size of a stuffed animal or whatever. Then, maybe they have a very long and ancient perspective and see things differently. But they're still, as a mascot character, really you don't want any GMPC type character solving everything. But as a mascot character, really they're not in that role of necessarily being the wise sage of solving problems, but they could still be someone who comes in and contributes things.
That's
mascot
right.
characters, I think, if you think about them from the perspective of TV shows, they're often stereotyped as sort of like, what's your element? My element is heart. Like the one who helps to keep the team together and things like that.
That's true. So Kitsune Warlock pointed out that one way to make sure that you're not introducing a character as a mascot that your players decide they really don't like is to chicken and egg it in the other way and just pick a character that the players have latched onto that they really like, and then have that character be a mascot. And that generally tends to help if it's a character that everybody already likes or enjoys, having them take a more central role as a mascot.
And once you notice that the players are enjoying that character, even if you were just thinking, that was some random throwaway character I put in there, you can easily give that the bigger role. Like, if you notice your players are, like, giving this character a nickname, or, like, your players are usually pretty stingy with their treasure and NPCs, but they decide to like give this NPC a bunch of treasure to help them out, or like they're doing other things that indicate that character is really resonating with them.
Yeah, for sure. And it just depends on what your group's dynamic is. For instance, in chat, Asha Mintalu is saying 10 years ago, they used GMPCs a lot, but their opinion changed over time because they affected the story too much. And it just depends on your group and your story as well. If you're talking specifically about an NPC that the GM is playing that is along with the party, Now, obviously, we've done entire episodes, both on Arcade Market and I did one on Roll for Combat Live about GMPCs, and the beginning and ending of whether or not they can be an issue. Also, it depends on your definition of them, because some people would not define an NPC who's constantly with the party, played by the GM, to be a GMPC unless it's specifically supposed to be a PC for the GM. And even some others wouldn't consider it a GMPC unless it was bad. So they're like, GMPCs were bad. And then you give an example of one that wasn't bad. You're like, oh, well, that wasn't a GMPC. So it does depend on your definition.
Yeah. When it comes to mascots too, with their degree of contribution, like if a mascot is like, you know, a little animal who doesn't talk, or like is like a Pokemon who can only say their name or something like that, that's also very much going to be a character that's a lot less likely to be getting in and shaping the narrative in these larger ways. They're a lot more likely to be focused on Pika. They're a lot more likely to be, you know, being cute. Pika. Perhaps the mascot character happens to be kidnapped by a group of bandits who attempt to ransom them back, but the mascot is so loud and annoying that they just released them.
So the whole ransom of Red Chief situation.
Yeah. Or I was talking about when the players like to invite an NPC by themselves. Exactly. Like, I think one of the key things about NPCs that are accompanying the party is that the players have decided that they want to have that NPC along with them as a part of their group. And then, rather
than the GM being like, I, the NPC, have decided I'm coming with you.
Yeah. Or, you know, you can also run it as like, oh, well, there's a large group that's going, well, then there's these NPC groups that are off doing things, but whatever the, you know, most important / interesting / engaging thing that's going on, that's what the PCs are going and doing, and the NPCs are, like, gonna do this other thing that sounds less interesting and exciting.
Yep. I mean, some groups like to collect NPCs and just kind of, like, convince them into joining the party. I mean, in the first campaign that you were in that I was running, there were several NPCs that just from the beginning, there's just this random healing cleric that it was an acolyte the party was talking to, and they rolled really high to convince her that, like, what they were dealing with was going to be an end to the entire city they were in, and everyone was going to die, and they hadn't convinced the authorities to take the threat seriously enough, but they did roll really high on that one acolyte, and they were like, you should help us even if the high priest won't send anyone else. And so I decided that she ran away from the temple and went with the party because they put a pretty hard sell and they rolled like some absurdly high number. And you know what,
anytime they could have been like, yeah, you know, we fixed the problem in this city, thank you so much, you can go back. But no, it's just like, all right, it becomes a long-term party member. Like,
Nadia the cleric was just a member of their party. And by the time Linda joined later on, that was just someone that she knew was an NPC was with the group.
Yeah. Another thing with those types of characters, too, is, I would say, I know this is getting a little bit off field, but just in general with those, making sure that they are not the ones who are making the big and important decisions. And also, you can look to delegate them in combat by giving players their sheets and having them run them so that the players have control over everything that's going on in the combat that's on their side.
And Asha Midulu points out mascot characters or those background characters who are actually super powerful, but they aren't showing you that they are, can have good payoff later on. Like, that certainly could be a possibility. In one campaign I ran, there was a character who, like, was admittedly kind of a mascot, kind of the patron of the characters, but was just known to have a ridiculous...
Yes, I'm wearing an Angel Devil cut. I wanted to wear a mascot type shirt today.
That's right. Known to have a ridiculously high, like, cooking skill and would just make people food. It's like, why is she so good at cooking? And they eventually, like, much later on, realized that she was actually a powerful ancient dragon, and it was back in 3.5 days when, you know, if you're a powerful ancient dragon, you have a lot of hit dice, you get a lot of skill rank maximum, and it's like, oh, she was so good at cooking because she had, like, 35 hit dice and put all of the maximum ranks into cooking, and that's why her food was so good. Also, she's an ancient dragon. That is not what we thought.
Yeah. But yeah, you can absolutely have these characters who don't show their full power level. I think you know, being a mascot ultimately is about the emotional experience that the players have of connecting to a particular character. Of generally,
or at least a good mascot
yeah.
will give you an emotional connection. And like you were saying, there's a risk in using a mascot if it gets too associated with the campaign and you use them too flippantly. I mean, that's Disney's whole problem. They don't even use Mickey Mouse anymore because they're afraid like the loss from using Mickey badly would hurt them more than any benefit from using Mickey like successfully.
Yeah, for sure. So in terms of like who plays the mascot, we got into this a little bit here, sort of implicitly, but the mascot may be someone that the GM is playing. It could also be someone that the player is playing, even if the player's character themselves is not the mascot. It could be like a familiar or a companion that they bring along with them. A mascot character, you know, doesn't have to be someone who's got a big role in driving the story or like it has deep knowledge of the plot, so they can absolutely just be like a friend or companion that
or a little animal,
or like
literally an animal that's not smart and just is like a cat that hangs around. It could be. Or it could be a little angel cat like on your shirt that is secretly a devil with the devil shadow.
That's true.
I mean, I don't know. That's a description of a lot of your of the characters that you like create as a GM, though, Linda.
Yeah, no, that's true. I really do love the cute characters with the dark side.
Mm-hmm.
Or the characters who start off like well intentioned and then.
Oh no. Apparently, Kitsune Warlock threw a yandere puppet ranger at the party, expecting them to be terrified, but they wound up making her the mascot.
Yeah, you never really know who players are gonna latch onto. Sometimes they latch into the most random characters, and sometimes you come up with characters you think they're gonna love, and then it's just like, meh. Who cares?
Hard pass.
Mm-hmm.
Stalker Rangers only have to use Hunt Prey once. That's true, although they're pretty useless against any other opponent if they don't change from their Hunt
yeah,
Prey.
Excellent point here. Another one from Kitsune Warlock in turn that they don't have to be... That they can be in like an intelligent item. We've totally seen those kinds of ones too. Like a mascot that's a book, or a mascot that's a sword, or a mascot that's any number of other things.
In fact, intelligent items, when included well, almost always wind up being some kind of mascot for the group.
And a great thing about intelligent items is that intelligent items have an inherent limit to their agency that helps like act as a hard counter to some of those. Like, oh, are they going to go off and do other things? Well, it's an intelligent weapon, you know. They're not gonna swing themselves. They require the players, and they collaborate with the players. That's
right. There's inherently a give and take with these items. They may have an agenda. They usually do, but their agenda is not going to be pursued on their own. So a sword needs you to swing it, or like the magic book that one of the PCs in my group had that was like the book that was passed down through generations of Wu-Gen in his family, like needed him to start a family because the rest of his family had been killed. So that was its goal. It wanted him to survive. Like it was on the party's side because if they all TBK'd, the book was completely in trouble and would lose its intelligence.
So the book was constantly commenting of like...
It was trying to matchmake. It'd be like... matchmake with anyone who seemed like they had high intelligence because it was trying to continue a line of wizards. It's like, what about them?
Yeah, what about the it's like, you know, what about this great imperial wizard or whatever? He's like, not interested. It's like, but look how brilliant she is. Come on, book. So you get like these sort of... I think that's another thing that comes up in a lot with mascot characters is that they can really lean into some of these memes and tropes and things like that in a way that feels very, very familiar. You can be like, oh, you know, there's the mascot doing their mascot thing again.
Yep.
And when it comes from a mascot character, it feels more, I don't know, like if you see that coming from a character that's not the more mascot style, it could feel like maybe they weren't as fleshed out as much. But when it comes from more of a mascot character, it's more like, oh, that's the mascot character doing their mascot thing, because mascots do have a sense of being more archetypical or iconic to them.
Yes, for sure. I've even seen that that toyed with on like in some cases. I can't remember right now at the top of my head, and besides, if I did, it would be a spoiler. But like TV shows where they have a character doing like a really mascot-y type thing, and you just assume that it's supposed to be a gag that they were doing it because, oh yeah, you know, they're just a mascot, so of course they mimetically do that. But then like it's a plot point later that no, they really could do that, and that's because they're actually some kind of ridiculous villain or some other character.
Mm-hmm. You also see in TV shows too where it's like the characters are fighting some ridiculously dangerous thing, and you know even with all that going on, the mascot like might get like a comedic injury but is not going to be really actually hurt.
That's right. It's just sort of the way that things work with mascots. I mean, if you kill the mascot character, that's the equivalent of like a kill the dog moment.
Yeah.
I mean, the dog in the kill the dog trope is probably a mascot. So, like, you can kill a entire city, or in Starfinder, an entire planet. You can blow it up, and it will not have as much of like a you monster impact as if you kill the mascot character or like the dog. Even if you're like, well, wait, I just blew up this entire planet. There were a planet's worth of dogs on it. People are like, yeah, okay. But that was this other planet.
Oh, yeah, Ashimento was talking about the theory that Jar Jar Binks was supposed to be revealed as a dark side user. I wish they had gone with that. That would have been satisfying if that was the plan.
I'm
like,
pretty sure that was just a fan theory.
I know it was a fan theory, but I wish it was true, because it would have been like, oh my gosh, this all makes so much sense. But, yes, Jar Jar is a great example of what not to do with mascots. Being tropey with your mascot doesn't mean like having them be too bumbling and annoying and getting everyone in trouble. It also doesn't mean like having them lean into racist stereotypes or other things like that. If we're talking about
those are all bad things to do.
Things that happen with that particular mascot character. Yes.
Yes. Not a good choice.
Yes. If the party doesn't like having the mascot character around anymore, they're not succeeded at having to be a mascot character, and you should find some way to phase them out. You don't want the party to be dealing with someone who's constantly bugging them, unless that person's supposed to be a villain that they're gonna go get to punch.
Hey, listen!
Oh my god, Navi.
Listen!
Yes, don't Navi.
Mm-hmm.
But you can definitely have mascots that, like, the player has a more, like, the players have, like, a more ambiguous relationship with, or that they may want to go up against later. But if you do, like, make sure they have an outlet for that.
Mm-hmm.
It's frustrating to have an ongoing issue that's happening in a game that you can't find a way to start going toward and resolving it. I mean, you can shake your fist at the villain, but eventually they need to have their comeuppance. Mm-hmm. That kind of, like, plot invincibility for reasons is, I think, one of the things that can be most frustrating for people about the GMPC type character. So
plot armor is... Mm-hmm. I would say that plot armor is always bad, but I've actually written a feat called plot armor for an upcoming project that I think is not bad because it's a feat.
Yes.
And the feat actually is completely balanced while also being kind of like having plot armor.
So I think what this goes into is, like, when I was talking before about not necessarily endangering the mascot, the flip side of that is you gotta make sure there's someone that the players actually want to protect.
That's right. You don't want players to just be like, whatever, just leave them out for the wolves. I just don't want to deal with this character anymore.
Yeah. Very cool.
So, is there anything else for tips on successfully adding a mascot character?
I mean, I think this has been fairly rambling, but we've covered what I've been thinking about in terms of the kinds of roles and archetypes that they fill and don't fill, and the variety of types of characters that might take that role. Anything else you were thinking
No,
of?
we hit all the points we had planned ahead of time, and we did take a meandering path by following what chat was saying as well. And yeah, I think that's about it for me.
Very cool.
So if so, let's say bye to YouTube and then do our outro. Bye YouTube, see you next
Bye.
time. All right,